Oh, it's the best thing ever. Hello, 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 everybody. Can you hear me okay? Can anybody hear me? Can anybody hear me? I'm hoping people can hear me. Hello, everybody. How are we all? Nice to see everybody this afternoon. Wow, we got Robin, we got Tish, we got Beatrice, we got Emily, we got Trista. Hello. Who else have we got? We got Mitzi, we got Catherine. Oh, we got Leslie. I'm just scrolling, trying to scroll back through the chat. Oh, lots of you. All early birds. Well, that's because you don't have to deal with my streaming software, which I don't know what it's doing at the moment. Susan, hello. Hello, Lorna. Hello, Wendy and David. Hello, Dawn. I'm not looking at what people have written at the moment. Hello, Juliana. Oh, wow. Hi, Juliana in Trio. Lovely to have you here. Hope you're well. Hello, Claire. And I think that's most people I've gone through. Ronnie Lynn, hello, Ronnie Lynn. Hi. Saw you there. Wow, you've been chatting for a long while. Hello, Zena. Hello to everybody. And I am delighted to have you here in Evesham this afternoon. And my streaming software is still doing the same kind of weird things that it wanted to do before. It did an update last week, but it just doesn't. I don't know what happens. I press everything correct and it gets to the exact screen I'm in now, except it doesn't do that final little connection that you can all see me and hear me. And then I have to stop it. I go out, I select exactly the same options as I did before, and the second time around it always works. It's almost like you need to kind of give it a kick to wake it up. I mean, not literally. I don't think that'd help. So yeah, we hate updates definitely at the moment. Delighted to have everyone here. Susan, I'm glad you enjoyed the Digbeth tour. I'm glad everybody enjoyed that one. And I'm glad I'm not the only one who gets confused with technology. I've had a very nice little early afternoon here in Evesham. I hadn't been here for a while, so I just wanted to go and walk around the route I was planning to take, just to make sure I can get everywhere I want to go. I had a lovely lunch, I had a little stroll, I had just had a coffee, and we're ready to go. So we are going to be seeing some very different things from what we saw in Digbeth, here in a much smaller town. A guy flying around in kind of well, it's kind of like a paragliding thing, but he's got a motor. It's not a microlight, but it's kind of like a. You won't be able to see him if I. Oh, let's turn it around. You can see him. There he is, flying above the trees. I bet he's got a better view of everything than us, but never mind. Tish, I'm properly fortified and all ready to go. Even got the man in the coffee shop to drop just a little couple of ice cubes in my black coffee just to make it cool enough so I could drink it before the tour starts. I've learnt from long experience that because I drink my coffee black, it's too hot and I have to end up discarding some before the start of the tour. Leslie, I think it'll be the only kind of incidents, if his engine gives in, where you jettison the engine and just come down on the parachute. Normally you come out of the plane on your parachute. In that case, you just drop the faulty motorised bit and sail gently to the ground. Big hello to anyone who has just joined us. Hello, Diane from Chile, Florida. Well, it's warmer here than it is. I was hearing listening to the radio, and they had a news report from Washington DC where they said the temperature was pretty cold, and they said that okay, thank you, Claire. I'll start in a minute. They said that the inauguration had been moved inside because of people standing outside for too long in the cold weather. And then they said, it's being shown on a big screen in an arena and people have been queuing outside all night to get in. I thought, well, they'd have spent less time standing outside in the cold weather if they just held it as scheduled. But there we go. So anyway, it is 3 o'clock here in the UK and it is time to start today's tour. So big welcome to all of you to this community funded tour, and thank you so much to everyone who contributed to make it possible. I'm delighted to be joining you from a brand new, well, it's not a brand new town, it's a brand new destination for our virtual tours with a very interesting history, and we're going to be talking about some of those things. Whiskey o'clock, is it? Oh well, I don't know about that. I've got to drive home after this, so I'm not going for whiskey o'clock. So let me I'm starting in a car park, always a good place to start. I do think that since King Richard III's body was found under a car park, I feel that's kind of made car parks much more respectable places. If they're good enough to be the resting place of a monarch, then... So the first buildings we see in here are Georgian, so it tells us a little bit that this town had quite a lot of prosperity in the 18th century still, and it did have some coaching inns. It's on kind of a main transportation route through the area, and it is also on the River Avon, so it was an important crossing point. It's been a bridge here for many centuries, but Georgian buildings are just a small part of the story here. That's not what this town is known for. Evesham is known much more for older buildings, for medieval buildings and stories. That's what we're going to be focusing on a little bit. So a town in Warwickshire on the River Avon has about 28,000 inhabitants. So it's about of a size with Stratford and with Warwick, but a very different character. So we're starting with a couple of timber frame buildings here, and we have one of the town's popular pubs here. And I know that during the pandemic, I've been told by certain ones of our regular viewers that this particular pub did some great online quizzes. The landlord here, they did an online quiz night during the pandemic that was very popular, and they watched from their homes. So this is the Trumpet Inn, and the Trumpet Inn is timber framed, but it's actually a 19th century imitation of a timber framed building, whereas the one that's next to it, that is a Chinese restaurant these days, that one is a genuine 16th century, so it's actually 300 years older than the one to the right of it. But you know, the Trumpet Inn, obviously, with a lot of timber frame buildings in the town, they were, particularly the pubs, they were building to fit in with the style that was here. So that's the Trumpet Inn, and as they tell us, husband daycare centre. Leave your husband with us. We'll look after him. You only pay for his drinks. Yeah. Now here's another very old building that has had stone and plaster put onto a timber framed framework, the old school cafe. It's now a cafe where I had a very lovely lunch earlier on, but it was part of the town's medieval school. So the school was founded here about the 13th century, we think, by the last abbot of Evesham Abbey when it was closed down in the 16th century, and they've left the stone porch on the outside here. So that's what the original stonework would have looked like, and it's built by Abbot Lichfield. And it became a grammar school, Prince Henry's Grammar School, which moved from here to a more modern and larger building in 1879. Prince Henry's is a school that still exists. In fact, in April, I'll be taking a group of their students to Berlin. They're one of the schools that I'm working with on my German trips this year. and possibly a French trip as well. So it is a school with a very, very long tradition. So let's go across the roundabout, which you can do as a pedestrian. Now, Evesham Abbey dominated the town and the surrounding area for many centuries, basically from when it was founded in the 8th century right up until it closed in 1540. And really the town grew up around the Abbey, and the area where I began, the car park, it's not just a car park actually, it's called Merstow Green, and it was the original kind of centre of the Anglo-Saxon settlement, which is kind of on a little hill above the river, and that was where the very first markets were held. So markets and royal charters to hold markets have been held in Evesham for a long, long time, so about going up towards 1,000 years, and this was kind of the village green, which was the centre of the village. Would have been a grassy area where the markets were held. The markets in later times, as the town grew, moved elsewhere. We'll see the market square a little bit later, but that is where it began. And all of the town grew up because of the prosperity and the influence of the Abbey. The Abbey, one of the wealthiest in the country. They held huge amounts of land, agricultural land. They were major players in the Cotswold wool trade, which was the heart of the UK economy. They think that they were possibly one of the wealthiest 3 or 4 monasteries in the whole of the country. Now, this building here was built by the Abbey. It's called the Almonry. Often on our tours we see almshouses, and they are houses built for poorer people. And of course, alms is an old word for charity. You give alms to the poor. That's ALMS. You're not giving them guns or anything like that. Yeah. And this almonry was built by the Abbey, so it's kind of just outside the main Abbey grounds, because it is not dealing with the monks and the community itself, it is dealing with the people of the town. So the almoner of the Abbey was one of its officials, and he was the person who was responsible for all of the charitable work and the work in the community that the Abbey was doing. And this was the almoner would have lived here. This is where they'd have organised all of the charitable work, where they would have probably provided assistance, short-term places to stay, perhaps even medical care for local people. Would also have been used for guests staying at the Abbey. Dates back to the 14th century. And as you can see, some of the very old stone tiles have been replaced by much more modern and presumably much cheaper and easier to maintain corrugated steel roof, which is a shame, but the majority of the building at least is still here. These days it houses the Tourist Information Centre and a little heritage centre about the history of the town. Dawn, yeah, it's a dummy. I'm not being cruel to them, it's just it is literally a dummy, like a tableau within the heritage centre. I thought somebody was looking out at me earlier, so I went and had a closer look. I stood and looked right through the window and looked them in the eye, and they never blinked. Yeah, the window panes are pretty old, Mitzi. I think they're probably about 300 or 400 years old. So this is the Almonry. It's one of the most famous buildings in the town, a beautiful survival from the 14th century. And part of the kind of heritage centre function of the Almonry these days has included rescuing some historic artefacts from the town's history, and they include the town stocks. So the town stocks, until 1920, they were at the town jail. We'll see later where that was. So this is where, for your punishment, you'd sit on the one on the back, and you'd have your legs through the one at the front, and people would be able to come and shout abuse at you and throw things at you and whatever, as a punishment. And it was always a public thing. The idea was humiliation, and so people could see justice being done. They were used, stocks were used in many places until really the late 19th century even, Bring them back down, oh yeah. And I find it quite interesting that I'm pretty sure that the little roof canopy thing has been put there to protect the stocks as a historical artefact. I'm pretty sure that they didn't put people in the stocks and then build something to protect them from getting rained on, although I may be wrong, I'm not sure. We get them in quite a few towns here, but nearly pretty much every town and city would have had them, but it's not always the case that they've survived. So here's one of the town's very historic pubs on the end of the road here. The old Red Horse, and you can see a little bit slopey in some of the beams, but they are about 450 years old. I'm just waiting for a gap in the traffic so I can cross. We'll be good. And the old Red Horse, we'll see on the inside as we get closer. That's why I wanted to go across. Is this is a type of horse, a breed of horse that was very commonly used for agriculture around this part of the world. It's a very distinctive red or roan horse, like a Shire horse. The big working horses used for pulling ploughs and for agricultural work. It's a working breed that unfortunately is no longer around. It died out, but it was used widely in the agricultural areas around here because there were agriculture and also an awful lot of market gardening here. So the Vale of Evesham, the area around here, is known for its fruit and vegetable cultivation. So they grow loads of soft fruits, strawberries, raspberries, plums. They also grow a lot of tomatoes and other kinds of vegetables, and asparagus. Vale of Evesham is known for its asparagus. So all of this agriculture would have been under the control of the Abbey, and this is the kind of horses that would have been used in that kind of farming. Now, there were numerous coaching inns here that were serving the through trade in the 18th century. One of them was called the Vine. This is called Vine Street. Now, the Abbey, the monks did have vineyards in the surrounding area on the hills, but actually it's thought that this street here, Vine Street, is actually a corruption of the word swine, from pigs, from some of the animals that were kept here, and from an animal that features in the founding myth of the town, which I'll tell you about later. But this particular pub was called the Vine, and you can see where you had the entrance for the coaches and the horses, and they've converted the inn yard and now I'm hoping my signal goes okay in here. Let's have a look. And it's just a really nice little conversion. They've made it into a little shopping area for local independents and those kind of things. There's a lovely little tea shop up here and a place where you can buy local products and all of these kinds of things. Really lovely place. Isn't that nice? And you can see this was pretty big. This was a big coaching inn, and there'd have been the rooms around here and the stables and all of those things. Susan, we're talking about Shire horses. Yes, amazing. My father loved them. He lived very close to one of Nottingham's biggest breweries when he was a kid, and the horses were always pulling the dray carts, the brewery carts, along the road in front of his house, and he had a lifelong love of Shire horses. And whenever I see a beautiful Shire horse, I always think of my dad. It's one of those things that reminds me of him. Well, I'm impressed that my signal held up in there. That's a good coaching in. Coaching ins are normally very dodgy for signals. So I'd like to tell you we've got an amazingly well preserved Roman statue here, but unfortunately not. It's just a decoration purchased by the Italian restaurant. Evesham was not a Roman. There was Roman activity in this whole area, but Evesham was not a Roman settlement. So we're heading up towards kind of the more modern centre of town. So the original settlement centre, closer to the river down there, where we began, and the focus shifted over time. So we're going to just take a little look. We've got a fantastic 16th century pub here as well. Look at this beautiful timber frame building. The Royal Oak. So it must have been renamed, because the Royal Oak refers to the escapades of the young King Charles II hiding in an oak tree from parliamentarian soldiers, but the building has been an inn for about 150 years longer than that story has existed. So it's built of local timber, but also with the stone. You know, we've got the stone that's being used here is limestone, and we're getting into Cotswold limestone area, with the Abbey owning huge amounts of lands around the Cotswolds. So they're involved in the wool trade, they're involved in the quarrying and the trade in the stone there. Beautiful carved stone, 16th century, and indicated by the Tudor roses. So these are very typical roses at the top you find in symbol of the Tudors, but also the beautiful acorns. This is later added. The Royal Oak, they've added that acorn carving later. Now across the road is the building known as the Town Hall, and the Town Hall of Evesham, it's coated in a very modern sort of facing to protect it from pollution and the effects of the modern world, but it was originally built of the same kind of stone. In fact, like many of the stone buildings in Evesham, it was built from stone that was kind of acquired, I'll put that in inverted commas, from the Abbey, because the Abbey buildings were closed down and they were essentially just a help yourself source of stone for local people. And the local authority built a new town hall. The reason they needed a new town hall in that 16th century was because up until that time, local affairs had been controlled by the Abbey. So all of the local administration, taxation, provision of services for the poor, courts, everything like that came under the jurisdiction of the Abbey. And when the Abbey was closed, as happened in many places up and down the country at that time, they refounded the town as a secular authority. So they needed a place to manage their affairs, and they built a Cotswold stone town hall, modelled on those that we find within the Cotswolds, places like Chipping Campden and so on. And so the ground floor, where these big archways are, would originally have been a market hall, an open market hall. And the upper floor was where the council chamber was, and also the local courthouse. And that end of the building, that was where you would find the town jail and lockup. That's where the stocks were, just on the edge of the marketplace, until the 1920s actually. They weren't still being used then, and they conserved them and moved them. These days it's owned by the local authority as a place you can have functions on the upper floor, and the ground floor is a pub and music venue called the Valkyrie, which is kind of ironic. The Valkyrie, of course, very much with Viking associations, and Evesham and the Abbey were attacked many times by Vikings coming up the River Avon, so it was not a place that was had any kind of good associations with the Vikings, but there we go. The clock tower was added in the 19th century, and reminds me of kind of church towers in Austria and southern Germany in terms of the shape, at least. Okay, so more coaching inns, former coaching inns with retail use of the space, as we saw, and a fantastic antique and collectibles shop here. Just magpie. Oh, you really be a magpie in there. Lots of sparkly things to collect. I always like these kinds of shops. They're cool. And well, we've got a few Paddingtons in there as well, so it's a must. We've got some Paddingtons. Anyway, let us... Oh, I'm going to cross here while the traffic's stopped at the lights. Look at this. What you'll see is that the main street here is a very typical English town main street. Most of the buildings look very much like either 18th or 19th century buildings. Most of them are actually older than that, with later facades added to them, or kind of half reconstructed in a later style. But this is the centre of town, and it leads up towards the railway, and that is on the London to Worcester line. It's the line that goes through from London Paddington, appropriately for the Paddington Bear figures we just saw, through the Cotswolds to Moreton in Marsh to Evesham, and then to Worcester. And this road would also lead you on the edge of town to the site of the Battle of Evesham. And here's some information on the pavement about the Battle of Evesham, but you don't need to try and read that, because I can tell you about it. But I'll do that when we're somewhere a little bit quieter in the park, actually, because I don't want to stand in the middle of the high street with cars and things like that. I want you to be able to hear what I'm telling you. But the Battle of Evesham was on the edge of the modern town. That was back in the year 1265. A long time ago now. We've got a 5 in the year, so it's easy to work out how long it was. $760 years. Yeah. So, as we start to come back into the centre towards the sort of old historic part of the town, start to see beautiful timber-framed buildings here, where they have been either restored or were never altered. Beautiful. And you see the wealth of the town from the Abbey, but of course local people who were merchants and those kinds of professions, and professional people in the law, the medicine, everything that kind of goes with having such a prosperous place. You've got this lovely little timbered archway here, and as we'll look back, we'll see this beautiful timber frame building, which, like many that we see, has some lovely carvings on it. So a great 17th century timber frame building. You look above the modern shops and you see this lovely timber framing with possibly some original window panes on that central section, and this very unusual kind of rounded bay windows with these carvings around them. And this is one of the main shopping streets. It's called Bridge Street, pedestrianised, and again sort of a much more modern, but there are lots of Georgian style buildings that you can see above the facades of the modern shops. Bridge Street leads down to the historic stone bridge over the river, which is called Monkman Bridge. It's not named after the monks of the Abbey, it's named after the mayor at the time it was built in the 19th century. But there was a medieval bridge there. There's also a modern road bridge on the other side of town, and the original way of crossing the river, operated by the monks from the Abbey, was a little foot ferry. And that still exists. It runs in the summertime. You can go across, connects a little kind of suburb or little village of Hampton Road to the centre of Evesham, and you can go on the foot ferry there. There's an excellent riverside pub down by the ferry. Now, I've been thinking for ages that I could do a tour in Evesham for you, and I came here a couple of times to check it out, and each time this beautiful building that's under reconstruction was covered up, and I kept thinking, okay, well, when they finish the work, but it's a multi-year project, and I just thought, you know what, sooner or later I just want to do Evesham, and we're going to have to miss this house, which is called the Round House. It's not round, but it's an absolutely huge and beautiful timber frame building from the year 1450. Nowadays it houses the bank, NatWest, and they are in the process of restoring it, and you know that they need as long as they need to show you what it looks like. That's essentially what it looks like, but it's really kind of just a multi-year project that and so you can see you come up to the you can just see a little tiny bit of the timber framing here. You can see the slope there as the roof beams of those beams, and so the doorway here with the timber door frame, 1450 original. And just outside it, we have a very interesting little modern sculpture from 2008. And this is about the founding of the town. Because, according to legend, a young boy called Eof, it's named after him, Eof's ham. And the ham, generally in English place names, means kind of an enclosed settlement, particularly a farming settlement. But in this part of England, it referred more often than not to an area in the bend of a river. And so, named after Eof. And who was Eof? Well, Eof, he wasn't very anybody of much significance in life, really, but he was a swineherd. He was in charge of keeping the pigs on land around here, wooded land at that time, before it was cleared to build a settlement. And it belonged to the Bishop of Worcester. Now, old Eof was in the woods here, looking after his pigs, and he reported that he saw a vision. So here's old Eof in the woods, and he saw a vision. And he saw a vision of the Virgin Mary on this spot. And he went and told the bishop, because he thought that would be something the bishop might be quite interested to know, that he'd seen a vision of the Virgin Mary on the bishop's land. And the bishop apparently came to the same kind of area, and he too had a vision of the Virgin Mary, and he was inspired by that to found a monastery here. And his name was Bishop Egwin. He later became Saint Egwin, and he's regarded as the founder of the Abbey here, which was in about the year 710. That was when the Abbey was founded, and it took the name of this swineherd, Eof. and that's the legend behind the founding of the town and the abbey. And the shrine of the founder, who was pronounced a saint, was a pilgrimage site. It was one of the initial sources of wealth for the town of Evesham. So this is the market square. You know, the market square moved here in medieval times from that initial space where we began. And so this is the market square. There is still a market here in this square, and along the widened High Street. It takes place, I think, on Tuesdays and Fridays, and they also have monthly farmers markets as well. So some lovely buildings around the market square, including this one. Now this one is these days the entrance to an indoor shopping centre called the Riverside Shopping Centre, but it was built in 1864 as the Evesham Public Hall, and what it was a place of entertainments and public meetings. There's a place for they had a little theatre and concert hall in there, and lectures were held, and it was also the home of the local technical institute. So it was a place where people would go and be educated, as well as being a place of entertainments. But it was closed down, and then because it had a conservation listing, it was incorporated into the shopping centre when that was built, and it's currently also under some renovation work inside. But beautiful survival again from a much later era. Now we're going to step right back into medieval times. So, you know, we're going to forget 1864. We're even going to forget 1450, and we're certainly going to forget the 16th century after the closure of the Abbey. So we're going to walk through some of the oldest buildings, the oldest timber-framed buildings, dating back in parts to the 13th century. The little pub here, the Red Lion, this is the oldest pub in town. Absolutely gorgeous building. And next to it, the Walker Hall, which was a local, originally thought to have been a wealthy resident's home, right in a prime position next to the Abbey, and later was kind of used for public meetings, and it's won conservation awards as well. And ahead of us is one of the medieval gateways to the Abbey. So the timber frame sections date back to, we think, 14th and 15th centuries, but you'll see there's also stone. So on this antique shop here, a lovely antique shop with the stone, mixture of stone, probably reclaimed stone from the Abbey, and a bit of brick, modern restoration, and timber framing as well. And if you look inside, you can see the timber beams. But the original gateway to the Abbey here was a stone one, and it was Norman. And we have these Norman rounded arches dating back to around the 11th, 12th century. So they are still here, and we can see they've been closed in. They would once have been like a place where people could walk. You can see the ground level at that time was much lower than it is today. But those archways replaced later, and as they built over the top of the gateway here. So we'll see the church house. This belongs to the... we passed Spudman. Yeah, we did. A jacket place selling jacket potatoes, a cafe selling jacket potatoes in one of the timber frame buildings. Beautiful timber frame buildings. Now, I'm going to show you, we're coming towards the Abbey precincts, but there's only one part of the Abbey that survives, and that's the bell tower. But there are two churches here. So let's go and I'll show them to you. So this one, we're not going to go right up to this one because you can't get close to it where it's into. This one was called St. Lawrence's Church. That is no longer open, but it is preserved by the Church's Conservation Trust, and it's open sometimes, but not every day, to the public, just to visit and to give donations to maintain the building. It was one of two churches that were built by the Abbey, because the Abbey, of course, was very wealthy, and the Abbey had its church, but the Abbey church was not for the people of the town. The Abbey church was for the monks, and so they built churches for the local people. And one of the first occasions that happened, when a church was built by the Abbey, other than the main Abbey church, was in the 11th century, and that church was paid for by someone I'm going to be talking about on more than one occasion this week, because that was Godiva. So, wife of the Leofric, the Earl of Mercia, who was ruling this area in the 11th century. And Leofric and Godiva were great benefactors of the church and monasteries, and they donated, she donated for the creation of a secondary church within the Abbey precincts. St Lawrence's was built then as a later one for that same purpose, for the townspeople to worship, and also All Saints. So All Saints is the one that we came out through the gateway close to, and All Saints is nowadays, it's the larger of the two churches, and both of them originally had separate parishes and separate congregations, but of course over time that dwindled, and they merged, and now All Saints Church acts as the main parish church of Evesham, and that is a lovely view with the All Saints Church with the timber frame building in the background. And I'm going to... So, All Saints built in this stone, two churches for the local people, but I said there's one part of the Abbey that remains, and there it is. This is the bell tower, the freestanding bell tower of Evesham Abbey. Now, in 1540, the Abbey was closed as part of King Henry VIII's break from the Church of Rome. What happened in some places was that the big monastery churches were kept, and they were then sort of sold to the town to be used as parish churches. But in Evesham's case, you already had these two here and another church elsewhere, sort of right on the edge of the town as well. So, you know, there was no justification for keeping the Abbey church, which incidentally was about the same size as Gloucester Cathedral. So when this is one of the largest and most powerful, most influential abbeys in the country, the Abbey church was about the size of Gloucester Cathedral. But the bell tower, which was not joined on to the Abbey church, survived. And the reason for that is thought to be because the townspeople just defended it. It was new. It was the last thing that was actually built here at the Abbey. In 1520 it was completed. I mean, it's an absolutely incredible building. I mean, it looks like it's the very end of sort of Gothic architecture, really. It's similar to the towers of Gloucester Cathedral or to some of the churches at the Oxford colleges in this beautiful golden stone. But it had only been built by the people of the town at the Abbey 20 years before the Abbey was closed down, and the local people who had built it therefore were still around, the actual people who had physically built it. You know, you're not dealing with something that's hundreds of years old that people are custodians of but have no personal connection to, in a sense. Not the way here. And they successfully petitioned for the town to be able to keep this bell tower alone. of the parts of the Abbey, and it's absolutely glorious, isn't it? And we're going to be able to walk underneath it. The bells still do work. I mean, the two churches here do have bells of their own, and apparently the Abbey church had bells of its own as well, but the belief is that the bells in the Abbey church needed replacing, and so they built a freestanding bell tower. Yeah, the Abbey, Susan, must have been just, I mean, there's a couple of artists' impressions of it, but it's, incredible, and this is just amazing Gothic work. And it now serves as kind of the gateway between the churchyard and the former grounds and site of Evesham Abbey, which is now a public park called, imaginatively enough, Abbey Park. And so this is where the Abbey would have been, and the Abbey church would have been right here in front of us. Would have been, the shaping of the ground is from changes landscaping over the centuries since. We've got parts of where it would have been marked out by these stone blocks. They've kind of excavated, they kind of know where it was. And we think that the high altar would have been somewhere around here, and it would have stretched off in that direction. And the main kind of body of the Abbey, where the monks were carrying out all of their functions and activities, would have been in this part, because you've got some of the walls of the Abbey there along here. And but in the last couple of years they've done a really lovely project. It's been they've had grants and done local fundraising and all kinds of corporate sponsorship and things, because what they had here was one remaining part of the Abbey other than the bell tower, which was what is known as the cloister arch. And this was the archway that led into the cloisters, and around the cloisters would have been the place where the monks would have slept and studied and washed and eaten their meals and so on. Cindy, it would have been just torn down, and they'd have put it out of use, but then they just left it, and the stone was subsequently taken by help themselves by local people. The lead from the roof would have been taken, and that would have been sold off. All of the property of the Abbey would have gone into the hands of the king, and they'd have sold off the lead from the roof and all the treasures to raise extra money to go to the king. So this led into the cloisters, and what they've done in recent years, they've cleared this area and they've made a new cloister garden, because the medieval cloisters would have had a garden in the centre growing medicinal plants. It probably would have had like a fountain and those kinds of things, and it would have been a place of tranquility, and they're creating that again. It was only opened last year, so, and in the springtime it'll start getting some colour in it, but they've laid that out over the last few years to create a space here. And here's a monk, but we get a lovely shot from here as well with the monk. We get the bell tower, the Tower of All Saints. You can just see the top of the tower of the town hall, and you can see the building and the Tower of St. Lawrence's as well. Isn't that lovely? So I just think it's fantastic that they've done this. It's a fantastic local project that's just created a lovely space within the cathedral grounds. And look at the cloister arch. There are remnants of statues here, look, where they'd have been angels or saints or whatever they might have been. Most of those would probably have still been whole when the Abbey was destroyed. Some of them might have been if they were saints and things, they might have been damaged. They also would have been damaged during the Civil War, a time of Puritanism as well. So, but a beautiful gateway with these carvings that's just survived here in the park. And on the grass here, you've got the stones make out a big circular area right next to this wonderful cedar tree. And that was the site of the Abbey chapter house. So that's where the monks would have met every morning to have a chapter read from the rule of the Benedictine order. So that was the life that they lived by, the rules that they lived by in their order, the Benedictines. And they would have discussed the business of the day, that whatever was going on involving their community and their efforts in the community, the town, and so on. It was the largest chapter house in England. And just again reflecting the wealth that they had. Blackfriars. Now, I'm not sure, were the Blackfriars? They were Benedictines, so I don't think so. But that's just to give the effect of the monk's figure, I think, the silhouette in the artwork there. So this is where the chapter house would have been. So we're really still standing in the midst of this beautiful abbey, and look at some of these amazing trees that would probably have still be already been here when the abbey was closed. There's some fantastic oak tree here, and look at this amazing cedar tree. That's fantastic, aren't they? And well, I do think this is a lovely park. Wendy, you're right. Brett Fortin is the place with the very, very old pub. Now, I said that I would tell you a little bit about the Battle of Evesham, and I certainly will do that, and I will do that over here, because over here is a memorial that was unveiled on the 750th anniversary of the Battle of Evesham. So the Battle of Evesham took place on the 4th of August, 1265, and on the 750th anniversary, this memorial was unveiled, and it's a memorial thought to be close to the spot near the high altar of the Abbey church, where the body was buried of the man whose army lost the Battle of Evesham. His name was Simon de Montfort, and Simon de Montfort was French-born, like much of the English aristocracy at that time. And he was the leader of a faction of barons, aristocracy in England, who were in revolt against the king, King Henry III, because they wanted the king to stick to what had been agreed by his father, King John, in the document we call Magna Carta. Now, that was a document that set out the basic rights and privileges within society, and so it governed things like the right to trial by jury and things like this, but it also governed things like the restrictions on royal power. But King John, in the couple of years that he had left after he signed it, he just straight away, he signed it because he was basically forced to, because they were threatening to evict him off the throne. But he kind of then straight away went against it, as did his successor, Henry III. And throughout those sort of subsequent 50 years, there was always conflict simmering under the surface. And Simon de Montfort came to be kind of the leading figure in that opposition. He actually started off very close to the king. He was his brother-in-law, believe it or not. In 1264, in the lead up to the armed conflict, Simon de Montfort called what is thought to be the first proper English Parliament, and it's really taken as the foundation date of our Parliament as we know it today, because it was the first ever Parliament that had been called where not only were aristocratic people and senior clergy and royalty invited, but also representatives from numerous towns and shires around the country. So it was the first parliament that took place in England with any kind of local representation being present to have their voices heard and to participate. But the king still refused to go along with what had been decided by this parliament, and it came to armed conflict. The king was actually taken hostage, as was his son, Prince Edward. But Prince Edward escaped, and he raised forces to counter de Montfort's uprising, and they advanced, made camp on a hillside overlooking Evesham. De Montfort's army crossed the River Avon and stayed at the Abbey the last night, and they didn't realise that the prince's forces were so close. But the next morning they got up to find that when light had come, that just on the outskirts of town there was Prince Edward's army, and Prince Edward and his army had the high ground. They had greater numbers, and there is kind of a sort of a something that was said about this, it wasn't the Battle of Evesham, it was the Massacre of Evesham, because the royalist troops under Prince Edward absolutely butchered the rebel army under de Montfort. At the time, it was quite normal that, particularly for higher ranking knights and sort of aristocratic people, that you would ransom them in battles, but they didn't. They absolutely just killed them all wherever they found them, and de Montfort himself was killed and dismembered by some of the royal retainers who had specifically been charged by Prince Edward. Your only purpose in the battle is to find de Montfort and to kill him. And so it was a massive, it brought to an end the entire rebellion, really. And de Montfort was kind of remembered as someone who was trying to get a better deal, in the sense of, for the barons really, but a deal that would have put limitations and constraints on the absolute rule of a monarch within this country. And he was buried here within the Abbey, where he spent his last night in the Abbey church, approximately on this spot. So yeah, things went back to kind of how they were, but I think, subsequent kings, Prince Edward, who led the battle here, one of our best known warrior kings, he came to the throne subsequently as Edward I, so one of our most warlike medieval warrior kings in English history. And I think subsequent kings realised that even though they still believed that they should have primary power within the country, that you couldn't constantly be having uprisings and armed conflicts and civil wars every generation. So, I think things gradually things kind of became a little bit more consultative in terms of having royal councils, more regular parliaments, and this idea that de Montfort started of having representation from all around the country present at national parliaments was something that continued. So for that reason, he's also in many ways seen as the father of our parliament. So I guess that makes him the grandfather of parliaments, because our parliament in London is sometimes called the mother of parliaments, isn't it? If he was the father of the English parliament, that makes him the grandfather of parliaments. I never thought that before. So we see on the hillside here, these are the terraces where the monastery would have had its sort of orchards, and it's growing food to feed the community there. Wasn't a huge community in terms of the number of monks, around about 50 for most of its existence. But there's a lovely view back up towards that tower, the memorial. And we're going to head down in to the park a little bit further, because I do want to finish by the river, because I keep telling you about this town being on the Avon, but I feel I should actually go down to the Avon to prove it. It's a little bit steep, and the sections at the bottom here, one of them has now been paved over, but there's still one of the pools. These were the fish ponds that the monks kept to have fish to feed the monks. Of course, very important, because Fridays and holy days, festival days, saints' days, you didn't eat meat. So fish was a very, very important part of the diet for the monks. Would have called it the stew pond, I think. Where are we going to go? So many people walking around here, walking their dogs, kids around, and that's really nice. I do really like this park. And it's a little bit muddy here. I think if we'd have been here a week or two ago, some of this might have been underwater. Certainly the place that I parked just along the little river a little bit, it's very muddy in there. Oh yeah, I can see the river looks quite high. Tish, Daisy would have had a fine frolic here, because I've seen lots and lots of dogs today doing just that. When I was walking up to start the tour, I was walking through the underneath the bell tower, and suddenly this spaniel came like lightning from the other direction, came sprinting from the churchyard through the archway into the park. I never did see the person who was with it, following somewhere way behind, I think. So here's the River Avon, just to prove that it's here. And there's the old, well, the site of the medieval bridge replaced with a new one in the 19th century. And the Avon, another little park and garden area on the other side. Lovely. And always the way all the swans and the geese thinking they're going to get some food. They will be disappointed. Sorry, disappointed. Even the pigeons are crowding around me, look. The gulls, they're all coming. Oh, what a lovely sight as the sun goes down there, dips down there in the west. And so it brings us to the end of today's tour, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Another new place on our list, and I'm really enjoyed showing it to you, and I hope you've enjoyed exploring it with me and hearing a bit about the history and seeing the different kinds of historic buildings along the way. So thank you to all of you for being here. Thanks once again to everyone who contributed to this community funded tour. We do have the next community funded tours are up on the wish list at the moment, and you can contribute to those. A Cotswold one, which I think is fully funded, and then there's another fascinating little place called Coleshill, where we can go and take a look. And this week I've also got another live tour coming up. It is on Thursday at the same time as this one. That is in Coventry, and it is going to be that's one you need to book for. That's going to be the second of our two new ones in Coventry, and it's called On the Trail of Godiva. So we're going to be talking about Lady Godiva again, and seeing statues and representations of her, and also looking at some more of the history of Coventry, and seeing little bit more of the city than we have before. So thank you very much, Beatrice, for sharing the links for the wish list for the community funded tours, my Padlet page where you can find all of the links for all the upcoming tours. And if you didn't catch all of this one, then it will be, you can just go on the YouTube channel and watch the recording of it in due course and enjoy that at your own convenience. So thank you very much to everybody for being here, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in Coventry on Thursday. And then I'm doing some plotting and scheming. There's going to be a few little announcements coming your way, a couple of surprises perhaps as well, and no spoilers. But might feel a little cold. I'll put lots of layers on. So I did share something yesterday talking about being cold. There's a little picture I saw that I sent to Sally Jane because it seemed to sum up her winters. It said the way to deal with the cold weather is to put on so many layers that you can no longer fit through the door and go outside. which I thought that's a great way of avoiding the cold weather. So, and that's what you need to do when you're thinking of Lady Godiva on Thursday. So take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you later in the week. Bye for now, everybody. Thanks a lot.